This is Tiby Erdely, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once again for tuning into the Matt Balaker podcast. It makes me feel important, purposeful, and just warm and fuzzy. One thing I'm most proud of about the show is the hair of the guests that we've had on, but today's guest takes the cake, especially when you account for cranial hair and facial hair, because both are on point. This gentleman is a Texan who knows how to ski and analyze opportunities. He spent 4 years at Goldman Sachs, people. He worked in private equity and ditched all of that to join key investment partners. Please welcome Tiby Erdely to the program. How are you doing, Tiby?
Hey, Matt. Thank you for the wonderful introduction there. I'm doing quite well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Well, it's like skiing, Tiby. We want to start high and just go lower the whole time. So we want to start in a nicely elevated, maybe 10,000 feet, I'm guessing. No, I understand you're a Texan. I have never had a bad time hanging out with people from Texas. However, Tiby, I've never been to San Antonio. I want to. So in preparation of a future trip to San Antonio, what would you recommend that people do if they say have 48 hours in San Antonio?
I would definitely say you need to eat. The Mexican food in San Antonio is second to none. All over the U.S., everywhere I've been, everywhere I've lived, you go out for breakfast and you can get a breakfast burrito. But San Antonio is actually known for breakfast tacos. So if you find yourself in the city, make sure you get some breakfast tacos while you're there.
Is it brisket they add to them? I've heard about these famous breakfast tacos, but I've never been fortunate enough to have one.
Sausage, chorizo, take your pick. You should get one of all three.
I will. I mean, I grew up in San Diego County, and we're pretty proud of our Mexican food there. But I think San Antonio might rival it. But you're so fit, Tiby. How are you able to kind of balance, looking svelte with eating these, high caloric breakfast tacos?
I left Texas. I don't eat breakfast tacos anymore. So.
That's a good technique. If something's holding you back, just leave it. And I want to talk about kind of what led to you leaving Texas, but before that, take us back to your earlier days. What was life like, when you were young and in San Antonio?
Sure. So grew up to entrepreneur parents. Kind of born and raised on the north side of San Antonio, which I'd say is just like a giant suburb.
Okay.
San Antonio is a great place to raise a family. It's a lot of people are surprised to hear this, but it's actually, I think, in the top 10. I think probably like number 7 or 8 of the most populous cities in the United States. But it's extremely spread out, and as big as the population is, it feels like a giant town, which leads to, I think, a lot of really great qualities for raising a family. So I had a really nice childhood. My parents kind of started different businesses along the way. I think I learned a lot from my dad, watching his struggles, watching his successes. Ultimately, I thought I wanted to go the entrepreneur kind of operator route early on, and then realized that I had a bone for investment banking. So I found my way to Goldman Sachs right out of school, and the rest is kind of history from there.
Yeah, the rest is history. So you mentioned, I mean, that's you're pretty fortunate when you have 2 entrepreneurial parents. What did your parents do, Tiby?
So, my mom always kind of was like my dad's right-hand man. So it wasn't like they were starting separate businesses and running them. My dad owned several different hardware stores in the San Antonio area, Ace Hardwares, and he's done other types of businesses from there. He's owned, like laundromats, other cash businesses, etc. But I got, an early introduction into retail and working with customers and whatnot, by, being 5 years old and, stocking shelves at a hardware store, or 7 years old and manning the cash register. I don't know who would trust me doing that, but
I like that. When your parents run the place, child labor laws don't apply. You're 5, you can, pull up your pants and go to the bathroom by yourself. You're old enough to work. I think that's important. So you had these entrepreneurial parents. You're stocking product at Ace Hardware. When did you realize, Tiby, that investing is part of you? It's in your DNA, so to speak.
I think when I was really young, I was allowed to watch the movie Pretty Woman, if you remember that movie, I saw.
Oh yeah, and just quick interjection. My wife's mom, and God bless her for it, would not let her watch Pretty Woman. But please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think I kind of snuck my way into that one, and I saw Richard Gere in the movie, like just being this like big hotshot kind of private equity guy sitting on a board. And I was like, wow, that looks like a lot of fun. I'd love to be in a position like that. And, he also got the Pretty Woman. And I was like, wow, those look like all the things that I want in life. I want to be a big hotshot and a pretty girl in my arm. And so at a young age, I'd say I was probably influenced by that movie. The other movie that influenced me quite a bit too was probably Top Gun. Ended up going the financial route though.
Yeah. So instead of, flying, with Maverick, you're doing net present value calculations. So you studied finance. What's the story there? Like what motivated you to pick that as a major?
It's actually a good question. I think that finance just made a lot of sense to me. My parents, they've been successful entrepreneurs, but I wouldn't say that they're the most kind of savvy financial folks or capital markets folks. And I started to take a pretty keen interest in, the stock market at a young age. I basically taught myself from the ground up how to trade. So like in late middle school, early high school, I started trading my first securities with a little bit of money that I had. Lost most of my money, but
wait, time out, Tiby. So, well, most of us are learning how to, figure out what capitals go with each state or solving for X. You're trading.
Trading, but not trading well.
Okay.
I was going. Yeah, I was. I was really hungry to bag a 50xer. So I was trading penny stocks that I knew nothing about, trying to do the math in my head and figure out how I could be an overnight millionaire, and quickly learn that is just not a viable investment strategy. And over time learned that it makes a lot more sense to invest in really good companies.
Right. So if you want to get the Julia Roberts types, look at the fundamentals, invest in good companies. So you've parlayed your background as a finance major into a very fascinating career. Now that you've had, I guess, a few years, call it, since college, what recommendations would you have for teaching finance to college students? Like, what changes would you want to see, if any?
I think I actually think I was really fortunate. My finance professor came from a very real world job, so he was the risk manager for USAA Insurance, obviously a massive insurance firm.
Yeah.
And he, I got into school, 2007, right at the midst of the financial crisis, and he actually was very much like a Michael Burry. He put USA in a really strong position to weather the financial crisis. I think he saw the same housing market crisis that everybody else saw. And he actually, USA actually came out in a really positive position after the crisis. They bet well against everything that was happening. And so he had a lot of real world experience. And I think that he did a good job. His name's Ron Sweet. I think Ron, Professor Sweet, he really kind of took it upon himself to show us real world examples of why finance is important, and specifically risk management. I think at my school in particular, what helped kind of propel the career is we have a small investment club called the Investment Society, and I decided to join that, and that's where I got some more kind of real hands-on experience on trading securities as well. His securities analysis class was really great, but actually putting real capital behind it from kind of alumni donations, et cetera, made it, very exciting for us. And then ultimately, he always asked us to challenge ourselves. And I would say that I went to a pretty kind of non-target school for investment banks. And the way to make ourselves stand out was to go out there and kind of make our names heard. So we joined competitions like the CFA Institute competition, where undergrads or guys or gals in grad school can join and put a securities analysis together and present it to panels of CFA judges. And actually, my junior year, we joined the competition and we brought home a regional trophy for my school, which really kind of started to help put my school on the map also, from kind of having a pocket of savvy financial students in there as well. So, I can't speak for every other school, but I can certainly say that having that real world kind of hands-on experience and teaching from our professor alongside a professor that was very encouraging of us to go out there and do the extracurricular kind of things, certainly lent to, I think, some of the success that I've had, getting out of school and getting a good job, and then kind of post-college as well.
Nice. So you had the savvy professor who actually would have been a tremendous asset at Silicon Valley Bank, but
yes, yeah,
that's neither here nor there at the moment. But then you worked at Goldman Sachs for 4 years, and I remember I interviewed there. I think, gosh, this was in like August of 2001, and then obviously the September 11th attacks happened. I never heard back from him. I assumed the position was not filled. But that was like the dream firm for so many econ dorks and just industrious people who were kind of career driven. What was your interview process like for Goldman?
It was very atypical. As I mentioned earlier, my school was just simply not a target. I went to the University of Texas in San Antonio, which you get a lot of kind of energy folks down there, from a finance side, but more corporate finance, not really investment banking. So we didn't have any of the major investment banks coming and knocking on our doors for, career day or anything like that. I'm sure you're familiar with the investment banks targeting kind of the Ivy League schools or the top, 10 business schools and whatnot. So I took it upon myself to go out there and find, these investment banks, and Goldman was, number one in my eyes. And I really kind of put all my eggs in one basket. And so I was privy to Goldman doing recruiting events at some of the other schools in Texas, namely the private schools. I heard that they were at UT Austin. I heard that they were going up to TCU, and I think that the other school was Rice. So really kind of the triangle of Texas, of Austin, Dallas, Houston. And I drove to UT and I pretended to be a student at UT, and I got into this whole kind of recruitment thing, met recruiters, and like a couple weeks later, I drove up to Dallas, pretended to be a student at TCU, and by like the third school that I'm driving to, someone from HR is like, "Okay, Tiby, that's a very recognizable name. Where do you go to school? Like, what are you doing? You're just following us?" I was like, "Well, yeah." She's like, "Why are you doing that?" And I'm like, "I want to work at Goldman Sachs." And she goes, "Okay, I'll get you an interview." So that was the, kind of how I got my foot in the door. Started the interview process. I think I probably went through, I honestly can't remember, but probably like 15, 16, 17 interviews, all of which were very different. Mostly, frankly, not even around like, are you smart enough? Can you do the job? Like, I wasn't really being asked to like solve like financial equations. Like, I was asked some pretty strange questions, like how many basketballs I think I could fit in the room that we were sitting in, or like how many manhole covers there were in like downtown Manhattan.
How many are there in Manhattan?
I think it took me like 10 minutes to answer the question. I think I drew it out on a board. So I'll save you that. I'm pretty sure the answer was wrong. But more than anything, they were just kind of looking for like your thought process. And then I'd say that the rest of the interviewing was really kind of personality driven as well. Weird questions, some normal questions, but kind of just seeing how you react to things. It was a rewarding interview process. Ultimately, I made friends throughout the process. I was sad to see that not everybody got an offer, but I think vast majority I actually did not. I was surprised to see some of the kids that did get offers. I could leave them nameless because we're probably all friends now. Yeah, it was pretty cool kind of going into, my senior year of college, and early into the first semester of my senior year, I found out that I had a job waiting for me out of school, and I was at that point the second alumni to get a job at Goldman from UTSA. And I think I graduated like 13 years ago or whatever. I think now there's been dozens and dozens and dozens of kids that have been hired from UTSA. So I think we set a pretty nice precedent that there actually is talent to be sourced from some of these non-target schools.
Oh, there's definitely talent, and also, I mean, you showed your own resiliency. I mean, essentially pretending to be a student at different places, and I mean, it kind of shows, like, I mean, you can wait for something to happen, or as the saying goes, you can create your own luck. Well, and also, being from San Antonio, Tim Duncan, the big fundamental. You were at, was it called the Fundamental Equity Team in Goldman Sachs? So there's obviously that connection.
That's right.
What does that team do? Like, you're finished with the process. What's work like?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I was, an analyst kind of working my way towards associate when I started. And I think probably joining any team at Goldman as an analyst, you're certainly at the bottom of the totem pole. The first 6 to 12 months or so, you're really focused on doing perfect work, very detailed work, but it's not really the most exciting work. Fixing pitch decks, correcting errors, ensuring premier client service. I can't tell you how many late nights I spent there because you forgot to put a comma in the right place, or the grammar wasn't perfect. And, it teaches you over time that, all that matters. The attention to detail really matters, because once you start getting into the investment side of things, investors want to know that you have that same type of attention to detail. So while it seemed, almost petty, starting off as an analyst to focus so much on things that didn't feel like they were that big of a deal, I can certainly say that as I progressed in my career, got older within my career at Goldman, or even as I transitioned to private equity or now into my own firm, all of those kind of soft skills that I learned early on have really translated into an idea of a culture of, striving for perfection and attention to detail, which is so important. But to your question specifically, so the fundamental equity team was a team made up of basically bottom-up stock pickers that were focused on specific sectors. I was on a team that was initially focused on the emerging markets, working in basically BRIC countries. Ultimately moved my way to a team called U.S. Core Equity, which was basically the blue chips. You work very closely with portfolio managers. Portfolio managers are the one making investment decisions. As an analyst or associate type role, you're allowed to bring investment decisions to the portfolio managers, basically doing anything they ask you, from basic market research or specific research on a target portfolio company or an existing asset, writing up investment commentary on the portfolio, putting together pitch decks to, attract new institutional capital in. So a lot of really great soft skills that kind of, I think, brought a pretty well-rounded fundamental kind of bottom-up investment approach to building out these mutual funds that we were working on.
Nice. So you broaden your skill set. You're learning soft skills. You have a keen eye for grammar and punctuation, but you don't stay at Goldman. I mean, this is the dream for lots of people, but you leave. Why?
So I was, it's funny that we're talking about this. I thought that we were going to be talking about Key and
we well, that's next.
This is fun. Look,
I've had Jordan on twice, and he wouldn't shut up about Key. So I want to get more of your backstory.
Yeah. So, look, I have a lot of friends now that are also alumni, or some friends that are still at Goldman, and you get varying reports of how people felt about their time there. But I'm certainly someone who thinks that my time there was extremely well spent. I really enjoyed the experience. I feel like I fit in well to what I was doing. It was a really, really tough decision to leave. At the point in time when I left, I really kind of had three options on the table. So the team that I was currently on at Goldman was basically downsizing. So Goldman had reached out to me asking me if I wanted to move to a different team. So I was basically in a kind of a quasi interview process. I already knew I had the job to go join another team. As I mentioned earlier, I moved from emerging markets to core equities. So I was going to go move to another team that was more focused on working directly with hedge funds. And I thought that was interesting, but it wasn't really the direction that I really wanted to take my career. But I didn't want to not, be out of a job. So I went through that whole process. I simultaneously went through an interview process with Google to join a real estate team, basically the team that goes out there and identifies Google real estate locations and builds out the offices. So it's a little bit more of like a real estate investment role. And then simultaneously, I was interviewing with the Swiss private equity firm Partners Group. And I ultimately knew that I wanted to get into PE. I didn't know what the path would be like to get into PE, given that I was mostly focused on public markets.
So you're still guided by Richard Gere. I love that. You didn't give up on your pretty woman dream.
I didn't. But what I did realize was that I didn't want to be in the hedge fund space. I wasn't sure that I was culturally a good fit for the team that I was interviewing for. And also, hedge funds don't operate the same as kind of fundamental guys. Like a lot of it can do with technical trading and stuff like that, which wasn't really, I tried that, in middle school and high school. And like I said, I failed miserably. So it wasn't really my bag. I was definitely more in the game for long-term fundamental investing. And so Google was interesting because I was like, oh man, I get to leave, the Goldman mothership where I work, 80 to 100 hours a week. And I can go work somewhere cool like Google where I don't have to wear a suit every day and they feed me lunch and this and that. But ultimately, I got the Google offer. The offer was okay. I had to move out to San Francisco. I didn't really want to move out to San Francisco. I was in New York at the time. And then Partners Group ended up giving me an offer, and it was basically contingent upon me moving from New York to Denver, Colorado, which I thought was much more attractive than moving out to San Fran. So ultimately, it was between: do I stay at Goldman and build a career here and join a hedge fund team, or do I end up moving to Partners Group and get into private equity and skip the MBA path that a lot of folks have to take to get into PE? So I took that path. I moved out to Denver in late 2015, and ultimately to Partners Group's detriment, I got to know the cannabis space quite well, which frankly I had not really even considered to be an investable asset class before. But yeah, maybe I'll pause there.
Yeah. So no, I'm fascinated, Tiby. So I want to learn. I've interviewed Jordan a couple times. I met Pete before I ever met Jordan. I've met you later. Lots of respect for your group, but I'm always curious, like what motivated each individual person to join. So how did you end up hanging your hat at Key Investment Partners?
Yeah, so Pete, Jordan, and I were some of the first employees to move out to Denver, again, kind of like circa 2015. And the three of us, we became friends pretty early on. And, we'd go skiing or this or that. And, business conversation would always come up. And in a similar vein to Goldman, I really respect my time at Partners. I don't think that there's any way I could have done what I'm doing now without having had that experience. But the entrepreneur in me, which I think was born from my parents, ultimately was like, well, I think I can do this on my own. And Pete and Jordan seem to have the same kind of entrepreneurial drive as well. So I just remember there was one time specifically, we were all sitting in a hot tub after skiing, and we're just kind of going back and forth at each other. Not, you can get your words in fast enough to be like, man, we got to start a fund or go do this on our own one day. But we just didn't really have kind of the bright idea of what asset class we could really compete in. At this point in time, we were probably 26 or 27 years old. And the idea of raising a traditional venture fund or private equity fund and competing with, the gray hair that's been doing it for 20 years, who would give us money when they could go give someone else the money? And then about, end of 2018 or so, when the Farm Bill passed, which legalized hemp and, CBD you saw hemp and CBD really kind of taking the nation by storm. At that point in time, I think a lot of folks saw that as a big precursor towards eventual federal legalization of cannabis. And, on one side of the equation, we saw that, there's all this investor appetite to get involved in the asset class. And on the other side of the equation, we quickly learned that we were boxed out from investing in the asset class at Partners Group. And that was kind of the light bulb moment for us. It was like, oh, wow, like cannabis. There's no institutional capital flowing to the space because they can't. And there's a lot of investor demand, but there's not really, guys or gals with our backgrounds offering institutional management in the space. And we said, that's it. This is an industry that we can go in, we can help develop, we can start to support it, and we can give investors an opportunity to invest with institutional folks like us. And then, the rest was basically history from there. So we decided to go out there, raise a cannabis fund. Fast forward to today, we've raised and deployed our first fund. We've done, I think, 16 deals now. We're done deploying Fund 1. We're in the process of starting to get Fund 2 off the ground and deploying capital out of that vehicle. And yeah, we're just kind of off to the races now. It's been a crazy ride, but a ton of fun and a lot of learning along the way too.
Yeah, I imagine. I mean, it's one thing when you're just finished skiing and you're kind of fantasizing about starting your own fund, and then but you guys actually did it, so that's
which very kind of crazy,
crazy, commendable. Fill in the blank. But you mentioned you've learned a lot. What are some of the learning experiences you've taken away in the last, call it, 6-7 years?
I'm going to kind of just shoot off the hip here, but I think the biggest learning experience is that you have to kind of start somewhere, and there's never going to be a right time to take the leap. I think that you have to be comfortable not knowing what the outcome of your effort is going to be. And what I mean by that specifically is that nothing's ever really going to play out exactly how you thought it would. We saw all this investor appetite and lack of institutional kind of places to park your capital when we started Key, and we said that's a no-brainer. Investors are going to flock to us when they find out that the ex-Partners Group, ex-Goldman guys started a cannabis fund.
Sure.
And it couldn't have been more different. We thought we were going to raise money in 2 months and be done and go raise another fund. And it took us, I think, 18 months to get to a first close of Key Fund 1. And within that time, like, in hindsight, I meet people today, they're like, wow, you guys are like successful. How did it happen? And it's like, we failed thousands of times in trying to make it happen. We just believed in the idea and we never gave up. I mean, we found 100 investors for the first vehicle, but we probably got told no, I don't know, 5,000 times to find those 100.
So it's almost like being an actor. I mean, you just have to get used to rejection.
It's tough.
Yeah. What key? I mean, it's easy to kind of just talk about it, but I mean, when you're living that, I mean, it takes a toll on you. Like, I mean, I've been on that side too, raising funds or starting businesses, and it sucks. I mean, I wish I could paint it a little more romantically. But what is it that prevented you from quitting, Tiby?
I think that we realized as we were going through it that it, first of all, like, we laugh sometimes because we look at the first iterations of our first pitch deck versus like the deck that we're working on now, and it's like, who the hell even gave us the time of day the first time we sent them the first deck, 1 month in? And I think about, even our skill set at pitching, like, it's not really something that any of us had ever really done before. We didn't even, we were still pretty young. I was the oldest in the group, and I was 29 when we started. We didn't have a robust Rolodex of clients and investors. We had to figure out, okay, how do we even contact people to see if they're interested? So in hindsight, part of what kept us going is that we were realizing as time went on that we were refining our process, we were refining our investor materials, and our ability to convey the message and the strategy to investors was getting better over time. And it was all done out of necessity. So after 18 months, we looked back and said, wow, that took, 7 times longer, or 8 times longer than we thought it would. But now that we've gone through it, we don't think that there's any other way we could have done it unless we would have maybe just got lucky with some big whale of investor here or there. It all kind of happened naturally, we think, the way it should have. So back to when I said, like, don't expect for things to unfold the way that you think they would, really what I'm getting at is that you might not even be as ready as you think you are until you actually go through it and you have some of that experience. So, it took a lot of time for us to get that experience so that we were eloquently explaining to investors what the opportunity was, and, learning that you have to talk to your investors and listen to what, problem they're trying to solve. Are they looking to invest because they, think that the industry is cool? Okay, well, that's a different way to tell a story. Are they looking to invest because they think that this is going to be a massive industry that has massive financial return? Cool, we can talk about that too. Just going out and blabbering to someone without understanding who they were was probably one of our biggest mistakes in the beginning. So learning to sit down and ask a lot of questions, I think, was one of our biggest learnings early on too.
That's a brilliant point, Tiby. I mean, it translates to business, but also relationships. I'm working on it. I'm in my 40s, and I'm working on it. It's like, listen first. Listen to whether it's your wife, your business partner, and then have a conversation. It's very easy to create a slide deck or go in thinking, all right, I'm going to impress her by saying this. Just like, shut up and listen. Thank you for sharing that. It's something I want to put into practice. What is something now, Tiby, that you wish you knew when you all started Key?
I mean, a lot of things. A crystal ball would make my life a lot easier. I think this is probably not the best answer, and I think that we did a good job early on from our fundamental backgrounds on avoiding a lot of these pitfalls. But I think knowing in hindsight how difficult it would be to get regulation to actually pass for the cannabis industry would have prepared us to make some different decisions early on with regards to duration likely being the biggest risk and balance sheet being the biggest risk to any of the companies and portfolio companies we're looking at. We got lucky in a sense that we were very critical of the balance sheets early on, and we were very focused on cash flow management and burn. But the part that got really tough is, just the cap markets have deteriorated so much in the last year, and frankly started to deteriorate for the cannabis capital market specifically much even longer than that. And so I think we could have made maybe some better investment decisions with regards to duration and balance sheet risk early on, had we known that the cap markets were going to fall out as much as they have. But again, I don't think that that's a key problem. I think that's just a systemic problem that most, VCs or
you're not the only ones to have that problem.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
I guess
but look, sorry, I was going to say fortunate. I think that, still young enough to, it kind of sucks that we're living through like a once in a lifetime historical event, like every 3 or 4 months now. But I would say, like, in the 4 years that, since we started Key, having gone through all of these crazy historical events, I mean, a pandemic, massive recession because of the pandemic, and then a massive bounce back, and now, like, a banking crisis. We're dealing with interest rates, with inflation. It's like, I do think it's going to set us up hopefully to be better investors tomorrow. So I'm thankful that it's happening now at a young age, because easy to bounce back from. I'm sorry for the folks that are older in their careers that are being drastically affected by these times as well.
Yeah, well, you're earning some gray hairs hopefully through all this, and some wisdom.
That's why I keep it so short.
It looks good. Whatever you're doing, just keep at it. Well, we're wrapping up, but I'm curious to be career-wise, what are you most proud of?
I think I'd say I'm probably most proud of my team. I don't think that we'd be able to do what we're doing with just one or two guys. I think that it really took all three of us motivating each other, being there for each other, working closely with each other, not afraid to speak our minds to each other, giving each other very real feedback in real time, with the without wanting to totally hurt someone's feelings, right? But
Right.
I think that yeah, I'm so proud of Pete. I'm so proud of Jordan. I've watched those guys grow tremendously in a short amount of time. They've helped me grow in many ways as well. I don't think I could pick better business partners than those guys. We're kind of in the trenches together, and it's in the good times, it's fun to celebrate with them, but in the bad times, it's nice to have them by my side.
Yeah, that support system. I mean, that's so true. What are you most optimistic about, Tiby?
Look, the cannabis industry is, I think, starting to be more widely accepted across the United States. So this is going to be a selfish answer to that, but to what you just asked. But I'm so excited for the prospects of where we can take key, how our investments are ultimately going to perform. It's really tough out there today, but the Oracle of Omaha said it best. Like, this is the time. This is the be greedy when others are fearful time. And we're seeing, I think, just such a massive reset in valuations that just looks so attractive to us, especially understanding how large the industry could grow into. Understanding that there is no real institutional capital or even real banking in the space yet today. We think once the cost of capital goes down, we are going to be in a really fortuitous position. So while it's tough today, we couldn't be more excited about deploying capital in this environment. And we couldn't be more excited about what eventual legislation does to the industry with regards to banking, with regards to institutional capital being able to invest in the space. And then also just the broader loosening of the restrictions, seeing interstate commerce happen, letting these businesses actually operate without handcuffs that have made it really tough to be an operator in cannabis, I think is going to pay massive dividends for us. So, look, I don't know, is it 2 years away or is it 10 years away? My guess is probably somewhere in the middle, but to get punny here, we're going to plant as many seeds as we can today. And when the time is right, we're going to plan to harvest these investments and hopefully we make a lot of money for our investors. And if we do that, then I think we do pretty well for ourselves too.
Oh, that'll be a fun harvest. You'll be able to find your Julia Roberts and go out and spend money. So
yeah, don't tell my girlfriend that.
Oh, well, no, maybe you've already found in a better version. Gus, sorry, I don't want to get in trouble. So where can people learn more about you, what you're up to, Key? Where can we help direct these listeners out there to be?
Yeah, I mean, I guess specifically, what do you mean, like with regards to the cannabis industry, or how should I answer that question?
Yeah, because hundreds of millions, if not billions of people are tuning into this. I just want to know, where do we direct them?
Yeah, look, I think that times are tough out there, folks. And it's, whether you're having a hard time with work or your personal relationships are suffering because of tough economic times or whatever is going on, just remember that there's so much more to life than work. I've never been in like a believer in work-life balance. I've always believed that work is just a part of life and you kind of got to roll with the punches. But my biggest advice to anyone is lean into those folks around you, to that support system. It's not easy out there. I don't think life was ever meant to be easy. We've made it a lot easier on ourselves over the decades and centuries with technology and et cetera. And I think a lot of people forget that. But don't take yourself too seriously. Be lighthearted. Take yourself as seriously as you need to with regards to work. But if you need to unplug. If you lose your job, it's okay. You've got family support, brothers, sisters, aunts, cousins, everything. So there's a lot more to life than the economy. And as much take it from a private equity guy telling you that. that certainly vying for success, but at the end of the day, happiness comes from many other places than economics as well. So
happiness just isn't in the capital markets exclusively. Very wise words, Tiby. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
yeah, thank you so much, Matt. It was a pleasure to be on the show here. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.